You found your way to Whispers of Crimes, a quiet corner where the shadows of the past are gently told. Here, we speak of real crimes and mysteries, not to shock or scare, but to wonder, to reflect, and maybe to help you fall asleep. So close your eyes, let your thoughts slow down, and come with me into tonight's case. Two children vanished. A mother smiled as the world searched, and her new husband whispered of doomsday prophecies and zombies. What began as a strange belief spiraled into a chilling series of deaths. A husband shot, a wife buried, and bodies discovered in a backyard grave. Was it madness, murder, or the making of a modern cult? The truth is darker than anyone imagined. This is the story of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. Chapter 1. Lori and Chad Before the Chaos. Long before the world knew their names, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell led very different but quietly interconnected lives. Lori was born Lori Noreen Cox in 1973 in California. Raised in a religious and seemingly stable household, she grew into adulthood with an outward image of devotion, particularly to her faith and her family. Over the years, she married 5 times, had 3 children, and became known for her intense interest in spiritual matters, especially apocalyptic beliefs rooted in teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Chad Daybell, born in 1968, followed a more traditionally religious path, at least initially. A devout Mormon, he worked as a gravedigger in Utah before eventually earning a degree in journalism and launching his own publishing company, Spring Creek Books. Through this outlet, he wrote and published over 20 books, many of which were centered on doomsday scenarios and personal visions of the end times. He frequently claimed he could communicate with the spirit world and receive divine revelations about natural disasters and global destruction. Their paths converged in 2018 at a religious conference. Lori, already a fan of Chad's writings, attended a Preparing a People event where Chad was a speaker. Their meeting marked the beginning of a rapid and disturbing spiritual and emotional connection. Chad believed Lori was his eternal companion. Lori, in turn, believed Chad was a true prophet. Lori became completely enmeshed in Chad's ideologies, abandoning her existing life, alienating family, and transforming her spiritual beliefs into a dangerous form of delusion. Their relationship, bound by radical eschatology, would ultimately lead to one of the most disturbing criminal cases in recent American history. Chapter 2. A Trail of Death and Vanishing Children. The timeline of suspicious deaths surrounding Lori and Chad began shortly after they met. At the time, Lori was married to Charles Vallow, a successful businessman who grew increasingly concerned with Lori's mental state. By early 2019, Charles began reporting her erratic behavior to police. He claimed Lori believed she was a god sent to lead the 144,000 into the end times, and that he was a demon who needed to be killed. He also warned that she had threatened his life. In July 2019, Charles Vallow was shot and killed by Lori's brother, Alex Cox, in Chandler, Arizona. Alex claimed self-defense, stating Charles attacked him with a bat during an argument. Initially, local law enforcement accepted this story. However, subsequent investigations and text messages between Lori and Chad indicated foreknowledge of Charles' death. One chilling text from Chad to Lori predicted Charles would be out of the picture soon. Soon after Charles' death, Lori moved to Rexburg, Idaho, with her 2 youngest children, Tylee Ryan, 16, and Joshua J.J. Vallow, 7, who had autism. At the same time, Chad remained married to his wife, Tammy Daybell, who had no public awareness of her husband's growing attachment to Lori. Then came a second suspicious death. In October 2019, Tammy died unexpectedly in her sleep. Chad claimed she had a coughing fit and simply passed away. Authorities initially believed him and did not perform a full autopsy. Just 2 weeks later, Chad and Lori were married on a beach in Hawaii. By this time, Lori's children had disappeared. Tylee was last seen on September 8, 2019, at Yellowstone National Park with Lori and Alex. JJ was last seen 2 weeks later, on September 23rd. After repeated lies from Lori about the children's whereabouts, authorities launched a nationwide search. The sheer number of deaths in proximity to Lori and Chad Charles, Tammy, and then the missing children was too much to ignore. Public concern exploded, and investigators began to unravel the terrifying scope of the case. Chapter 3: Cult Ideology and the Zombies Doctrine. The key to understanding the psychological and criminal motivation behind these killings lies in Lori and Chad's shared religious delusions. Their belief system was not simply devout Mormonism, it was a twisted reinterpretation involving reincarnation, demonic possession, and a coming apocalypse. Chad had developed an intricate spiritual ranking system that classified people as either light or dark. According to Chad, those deemed dark had become possessed by evil spirits or zombies. Once a person was identified as a zombie, their soul had supposedly left their body, which was now inhabited by a demonic entity. The only way to save them and the world was to physically destroy the host body. Lori adopted this ideology with disturbing zeal. According to text messages and testimony from close friends, she believed both her children had become zombies. She also believed her ex-husband Charles and even Chad's wife Tammy were possessed. Chad and Lori kept rating systems and discussed people's death percentages, indicating how close they were to being fully possessed and thus needing to die. Psychologists later diagnosed Lori with delusional disorder. However, the broader picture suggests elements of narcissistic personality disorder and possibly shared psychotic disorder, or folia do, where one person's delusion is transferred to another. In this case, Chad was likely the originator of the belief system, and Lori, already vulnerable due to emotional instability and intense spiritual yearning, absorbed it completely. What began as private religious fantasy quickly evolved into a justification for cold-blooded murder. The two became convinced they were divine agents, cleansing the earth one soul at a time. Chapter 4: The Missing Children and a Gruesome Discovery. As public concern mounted over the missing children, Lori and Chad refused to cooperate. In January 2020, a court ordered Lori to produce JJ and Tylee within 5 days. She didn't comply. Instead, she and Chad remained in Hawaii, where they had married under false pretenses and were living comfortably. Back in Idaho, police began connecting the dots. In June 2020, they searched Chad's property in Salem, Idaho. What they discovered would break the case wide open. Buried in shallow graves behind Chad's home were the remains of JJ and Tylee. JJ's body was wrapped in plastic and duct tape. His arms were bound, and he had been asphyxiated. Tylee's body had been burned, dismembered, and placed in a pet cemetery. The conditions of the remains suggested an attempt to both hide and desecrate the bodies, something deeply incongruent with a mother's protective instincts. Lori was charged with multiple felonies, including conspiracy to commit murder. Chad was arrested and charged shortly after. The children's deaths confirmed investigators' worst fears and ended months of public speculation. But it also raised more questions. When did Lori decide her children were expendable? And how could someone who was seen as a devoted mother carry out such unthinkable acts? Chapter 5: Legal Unraveling and Psychological Defense. After the discovery of the children's bodies, Lori was extradited to Idaho and held on $1 million bail. Prosecutors built a case that centered not just on the physical evidence, but on a digital trail of text messages, emails, and audio recordings where Chad and Lori detailed their beliefs and plotted the deaths. Lori was declared unfit to stand trial in May 2021 and was committed to a psychiatric facility for almost a year. In April 2022, she was deemed competent and proceedings resumed. Meanwhile, Arizona prosecutors filed additional charges against her for conspiracy to commit the murder of Charles Vallow, adding another layer to the growing list of indictments. Throughout her legal proceedings, Lori remained largely expressionless. In court, she often smiled or dismissed the proceedings as unimportant. Legal experts believe her behavior reflected a mix of religious delusion and narcissism. Psychologists testify that while Lori's beliefs were extreme, she still understood the consequences of her actions, an important standard for determining criminal responsibility. In May 2023, Lori was tried in Idaho for the murders of JJ, Tylee, and Tammy Daybell. The trial featured damning testimony, including forensic evidence, digital messages, and statements from Lori's former friends and family, who had been drawn into her religious orbit before distancing themselves in horror. Chapter 6: Conviction and Sentencing. The jury took just over 7 hours to find Lori guilty on all charges. She was convicted of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and grand theft. Prosecutors did not seek the death penalty in her case, largely due to her mental health history. In July 2023, Lori was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Judge Stephen Boyce described her actions as heinous and said she showed a lack of remorse and empathy that shocks the conscience. At her sentencing, several family members, including JJ's grandparents, offered tearful victim impact statements. They spoke of the deep betrayal they felt and the lasting trauma inflicted by Lori's actions. Lori, in turn, claimed that her children were happy in the afterlife and that she continued to communicate with them, spiritually comments that reaffirmed the depth of her delusions. Her Arizona trial for Charles Vallow's murder is still pending. Chapter 7: Awaiting Chad's Trial and Legacy of Horror. As of 2025, Chad Daybell remains in custody, awaiting his trial, which is scheduled to begin later this year. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. His defense team is expected to rely on mental health arguments, but the volume of evidence from his writings, text messages, and digital planning makes conviction highly likely. The Lori and Chad case remains a cautionary tale. It has exposed vulnerabilities in the way mental illness intersects with the legal system, the potential dangers of fringe religious ideologies, and how charismatic figures can manipulate others into committing atrocities. It also forced a national conversation about missing children protocols. JJ and Tylee's disappearances took months to gain traction despite early warning signs. Lawmakers in Idaho and Arizona have since proposed legislation to speed up missing child investigations and expand access to mental health resources in custody disputes. In the end, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell saw themselves as saviors of mankind, but history will remember them as manipulators, criminals, and killers whose twisted beliefs led to the deaths of innocent people, including their own loved ones. That's all for tonight's story. Another thread in the web of true crime, quietly unraveling as the night goes on. If you're still with me, thanks for listening. And if sleep has already taken you, may your dreams be peaceful and your mind at ease. I'll be here next time by the fire with another story waiting to be told. Good night, and don't forget to lock your doors.